I thought I had the perfect life, a loving husband, a best friend who was like a sister, and dreams for our future. But behind the smiles and laughter, secrets were quietly eating away at everything I believed in. One night, I uncovered the truth that no one wanted me to see, betrayal so deep it shattered my heart and turned my world upside down. This is a story about trust broken, love lost, and the painful path to finding myself again when the people I loved most became my greatest enemies. Part 1. The calm before the storm. I still remember the exact moment I thought life couldn't get any better. It was a golden summer evening, the kind of night where the sky melts into shades of pink and orange and the world feels impossibly full of hope. My husband, Mark, held my hand tightly as we walked down the quiet streets of our neighborhood. His eyes, always so steady and warm, sparkled with that familiar mix of mischief and love that had drawn me to him years ago. Beside us was Lucy, my best friend since college, the person who had been there through every heartbreak, every triumph, every secret. We laughed, talked about our dreams, and planned our futures as if nothing could ever break us. We were inseparable, the three of us. Mark and Lucy, both so important to me, each in their own unique way. Mark was the anchor of my world, steady and reliable, while Lucy was my spark. Adventurous, wild, the sister I never had. We shared everything: dinners, holidays, late-night talks, and even the small, silly traditions that only best friends understand. Our bond felt unbreakable, or at least that's what I believed, but the first sign that something was off came slowly, almost imperceptibly. Mark started working later hours. Nothing unusual at first, but then the excuses piled up. Late meetings, business dinners, unexpected client visits. Lucy was suddenly harder to reach too. Calls unanswered, messages left on read. When we were together, there was a strange tension beneath the surface, a flicker of something unsaid. But I convinced myself it was nothing. After all, what could go wrong when you trust the people you love the most? Our marriage was about to hit its 15th year, a milestone I looked forward to celebrating with joy. Mark had planned a surprise trip, and I felt the familiar flutter of excitement that comes with being deeply loved. We had our daughter, Emma, who was the light of our lives, her laughter filling our home with warmth. Everything seemed perfect, a picture painted with the brightest colors. Until one night changed everything. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. Mark had told me he was working late again, and Lucy was busy with family. I was alone, sitting on the couch with a sketch pad, trying to lose myself in my drawings. That's when my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the cafe in 30, we need to talk." Curiosity mixed with unease as I hesitated, but my instincts told me I had to know the truth. I dressed quickly and headed out into the night, the city's lights blurring as my mind raced with questions. At the cafe, I saw them, Mark and Lucy, sitting close, their hands barely touching, eyes locked in a way that made my chest tighten. The warmth I had always felt turned icy. They smiled at me, but it was a different kind of smile, the one that hides lies. They had been planning this for months. Behind my back, they had built a secret world, full of whispered conversations and stolen moments. The betrayal wasn't just in the cheating, it was the way they had manipulated the trust I had given them so freely. I left the cafe without a word, my heart breaking with every step. That night, I realized my life was about to unravel, and the people I loved the most were the ones holding the scissors. Part 2. Fractured Trust. The days after that night felt like I was walking through a thick fog. Everything was muted, colors dulled, sounds muffled. I kept replaying that moment over and over, the way Mark and Lucy looked at each other, their secret smiles, the betrayal sharp as a blade cutting through my heart. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to cry myself raw, but I didn't. Instead, I buried the pain deep inside, like a poison I was trying to hide from the world. I told myself I was strong enough to handle this, that maybe it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. But the truth clawed at my mind, refusing to be silenced. I started watching them closely. Every glance Mark gave his phone, every urgent meeting that kept him away from home, every time Lucy had to leave early. I collected fragments of evidence like shards of glass, each piece more painful than the last. I found texts, photos, dates, proof that the betrayal wasn't a single night, but months, maybe even a year of deception. My nights were sleepless. I'd lie awake, the ceiling spinning, wondering where I went wrong. Had I stopped being enough? Had the years together meant nothing? My heart was a battlefield of love and anger, hope and despair. I was desperate to believe in the man I married, but every new discovery pushed me further away from that truth. One evening, Mark came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I confronted him quietly, my voice trembling but steady. He looked at me with tired eyes, and for a moment I saw regret flicker, before he turned away, too ashamed to face me. "Emma," he said, using my name like it was a fragile thread between us. "It's complicated. I never wanted to hurt you." But words meant nothing now. Lucy stopped answering my calls altogether. The silence from her was deafening. Our friendship, built over years of trust, was shattered, replaced by an unbearable emptiness. I told no one. I carried the burden alone, afraid of judgment, ashamed of my own heartbreak. I kept going for Emma's sake, her innocent smiles, her endless questions about why Mommy was sad sometimes. But inside, I was crumbling. The hardest part was pretending that everything was fine, that the life I loved hadn't been torn apart in secret meetings and whispered lies. I was living in a house full of ghosts, the memories of better times mocking me with their cruelty. I tried to talk to Mark, to salvage something, anything, but every conversation ended in silence or blame. He promised change, but the promises felt hollow. One night, I found myself sitting on the floor of our bedroom, clutching Emma's favorite stuffed bear, tears streaming down my face. The weight of betrayal was suffocating. I was lost, broken, and terrified of what the future held. And then the unexpected happened. Lucy reached out, a message. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" My heart pounded. Part of me wanted to forgive, to understand, to hear her side. Another part screamed to shut the door forever. I knew that meeting her would change everything. The fragile thread of hope I had been holding onto was about to either snap or pull me back from the edge. Because sometimes, even in the deepest betrayal, the hardest path is to find the strength to confront the pain. And maybe, just maybe, find a way to heal. Part 3: The Gathering Storm. After that explosive night, everything felt different, fractured, fragile. The house was no longer a home, it was a battlefield of whispered accusations and silent tears. Daniel and Sophie acted like nothing had changed, but I saw the cracks in their smiles and the weight behind their eyes. I tried to keep my composure for Lily's sake. She was my anchor, my reason to hold on when the world threatened to pull me under. But every time I looked at Daniel, I felt a storm building inside me, a furious mix of betrayal, heartbreak, and numbness. Sophie avoided my gaze. She moved through the house like a ghost, pretending the past weeks hadn't shattered everything. I wanted to scream at her, to ask why she had done this to me, her own sister, but all I could do was watch, waiting for her to break. Daniel became colder by the day. The man who once held me tenderly was now a stranger who barely spoke, his eyes drifting toward his phone or out the window. I caught glimpses of texts on his screen, messages from Sophie, plans whispered behind my back. It was a cruel reminder that they were rewriting our story without me. One afternoon, I found Sophie sitting on the porch steps, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since I discovered the betrayal, she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." But how could I believe her? How could I trust the words of the woman who stole my husband, my future? Days turned into restless nights. I slept with Lily beside me, her tiny breaths a fragile reminder of hope. But I was drowning in despair. The betrayal wasn't just about Daniel or Sophie, it was about losing the family I thought we had. The sanctuary I'd built, now a ruin. I tried to find solace in friends, but even their kind words couldn't reach the deep ache inside me. I was trapped in a cage of my own making, suffocating under the weight of lies. Then came the moment I dreaded most. Daniel told me he wanted to leave, that he was done pretending, that he and Sophie were starting over. My world crumbled again, but this time I refused to fall apart. I told him I wasn't just going to disappear like a forgotten memory, that I was fighting, for Lily, for myself. The next weeks were a blur of lawyers, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet, even when my knees shook. I found strength in the eyes of my daughter, in the small moments of laughter that broke through the pain. Yet, despite everything, I couldn't shake the shadow looming over us, the fragile peace that could shatter at any moment. One cold evening, I sat by the window, watching the rain fall, thinking about how much had been lost and how much I still had to fight for. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let betrayal define me. Not now, not ever. Part 4. Fractured Truths. The days blurred together, marked only by the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the empty rooms and the cold silence that lingered between Daniel and me. Our home, once filled with warmth and promises, had become a place I barely recognized. Every glance, every word between Daniel and Sophie felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. I kept telling myself to stay strong for Lily, but some nights I would lie awake, the weight of betrayal crushing me. How could the man I loved choose her over me? And how could Sophie, my own sister, betray the bond we shared for so many years? The court dates came and went. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. But every time I looked at Lily's innocent face, I found the strength to carry on. For her, I needed to be whole. One evening, I decided I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating the last pieces of my broken heart. So, with a bag packed quietly in the corner, I took Lily and left for a small apartment near my workplace. It was modest, but it was ours. The fresh start was harder than I imagined. Balancing motherhood, work, and the constant ache of loneliness felt like an impossible juggling act. I missed Daniel, not the man who betrayed me, but the one I thought I knew, the man I had dreamed of growing old with. Sophie stopped returning my calls. Our conversations became cold and terse whenever we did speak. I realized the family I had once trusted was no longer mine. One night, as Lily slept peacefully, I sat by the window, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of birthdays, holidays, and happy times with Daniel and Sophie. My chest tightened with grief and anger. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Daniel, alone, injured, hospital bed, IV drip. My breath caught. Panic flooded through me. I called the number immediately, demanding answers. The voice on the other end was calm but distant. It was a car accident. He's stable, but the prognosis is uncertain. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after the betrayal and heartbreak, life was about to deliver another cruel twist. I found myself rushing to the hospital, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. Would I forgive him? Could I? Or was this just another chapter in a story I never wanted to be part of? As I stood outside the hospital room, the sterile smell and quiet beeping machines surrounded me, and I realized that the past, no matter how painful, was still a part of my story. But the future, that was mine to write. Part 5. The Weight of Forgiveness. The sterile hospital room felt colder than the autumn night outside. I stood at the foot of Daniel's bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest beneath the thin hospital blanket. Machines beeped steadily, a mechanical rhythm that filled the silence between us. His face was pale, bruised, and more fragile than I ever imagined. The man I once loved and lost was now a shell of himself, fighting for every breath. I wanted to scream at him, at the universe, at myself. How had we come to this? From dreams and vows whispered in a garden to this bleak moment filled with regret and uncertainty. Sophie had been nowhere to be found. I hadn't heard from her since the night it all fell apart. Part of me hated her for abandoning us, but another part understood betrayal fractures more than just hearts. It breaks families. I took Lily to my sister's place and promised her I'd be back soon. This was a battle I had to face alone. The days that followed were a blur of doctors' reports, visitors, and an endless stream of questions. Daniel's condition was stable but precarious. The accident had left him with a severe head injury, and doctors warned of possible permanent damage. I found myself torn between old wounds and new fears. Forgiveness seemed impossible, yet anger and bitterness weighed heavily on my soul. One afternoon, alone in the waiting room, I let the tears fall freely. For the betrayal, for the shattered dreams, for the life that could never be. A nurse approached gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the hardest forgiveness is forgiving yourself." Her words struck a chord. Had I blamed myself for loving too deeply, for trusting blindly, for hoping against hope? That night I sat by Daniel's bedside, taking his hand in mine. It was cold, but real. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," I whispered, "but I'm here. For you, for Lily, for us. Whatever us means now." The road ahead was uncertain. The pain was raw and relentless. But in that fragile moment, I chose to hope, for healing, for strength, for a future where broken hearts might find peace. Because sometimes survival is the bravest act of all. There's a strange kind of stillness that comes when your life has collapsed, but the world insists on moving forward. The days grew colder, greyer, matching the empty space Daniel left behind in our home, even though he was technically still alive. Machines kept him breathing, beeping their artificial rhythm through the ICU. But his eyes hadn't opened since the crash, and every time I stood by his bed, I wondered if I was watching the man I once loved disappear molecule by molecule. I visited daily, not out of love, not anymore, but out of duty, or maybe closure. I don't know. Each time I sat there, I remembered how it all began, the way he used to look at me like I was sunlight. Now he lay under sterile lights, and all I felt was cold. Sophie hadn't reached out since her last text weeks ago. She vanished completely. No social media updates, no calls. Our parents pretended everything was normal when I dropped Lily off, but I could feel the unspoken grief in every stilted conversation. One night, Lily asked, "Mommy, when's Daddy coming home?" I froze. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father betrayed you with her aunt, then ended up in a coma days after everything imploded? "He's resting right now, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her curls from her face. "But we're going to be okay, just you and me." She nodded, but her eyes, Daniel's eyes, stared back with a sadness too heavy for her age. That night, I stayed up late, scrolling through old photos on my phone, us at the beach, Sophie holding Lily when she was a newborn, a Christmas morning from 3 years ago, Daniel, me and Sophie, all smiling like a perfect lie. Suddenly, an email pinged into my inbox from Sophie Turner. Subject, "I'm not asking for forgiveness, but..." I stared at it for 5 full minutes before clicking. "Emma, I've written and deleted this message 100 times. I don't expect you to respond, and I'll understand if you never want to speak to me again. What I did to you, to us, is unforgivable. I don't know who I became. I think I was jealous. Not of your life, but your strength, your grace. And Daniel. He was never supposed to happen. I didn't mean to fall for him, and I wish I had stopped it. But I didn't. I lost everything too. You, Lily, our family. I'm alone now. I moved to another city. I'm trying to fix myself, but some damage can't be undone. I want you to know I think about you every day, about Lily, and I pray you're okay. I'm sorry. Sophie, I read it 3 times. I wanted to scream, throw my laptop, rage at the universe, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the blinking cursor of my inbox. She thought she lost everything. I was the one left to pick up the pieces of a broken marriage, raise a daughter in the aftermath, and sit beside a dying man I once called my soulmate. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a deep breath and opened a blank document. I began to write everything down. From the moment I noticed their glances, the lies, the silence, the text that shattered my heart, the crash, the loneliness, the aching in Lily's eyes. I poured it all out, not for Sophie, not for Daniel, but for me. It was the first time I felt like I could breathe in months. The next morning, the hospital called. Daniel's condition had worsened, multi-organ failure. They recommended we prepare for end-of-life decisions. I stood outside the hospital for 20 minutes, just staring up at the grey sky. This was it, the end. Not just of our marriage, of him. The man who once promised me forever, now fading piece by piece. And somehow, the pain felt quieter than I expected. Colder. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I had already buried him in my heart long ago. The hospital room was quiet, almost peaceful, a cruel contrast to the war inside me. Daniel's skin was pale, his chest rising and falling in slow mechanical rhythm. Machines hissed and beeped around him, filling the silence with artificial life. But it wasn't really him anymore. Whatever was left of the man I married, the man who laughed at my corny jokes and kissed my stomach when I was pregnant, it was gone long before this. A nurse entered, kind-eyed and gentle-voiced. "We'll give you a few minutes," I nodded, clutching a small envelope in my hand. Inside, it was the last thing I had to give him. Closure. Or maybe just words I needed to say out loud. I sat down beside the bed and took a deep breath. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling, "you broke me." I let the words hang in the air, letting them pierce the quiet like a confession. "You shattered everything we built. I gave you all of me, my heart, my trust, 15 years of my life, and you gave it to someone else, my sister no less." Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. I kept asking myself what I did wrong. Was I not enough, not beautiful enough, not exciting enough? My voice cracked. But the truth is, your choices weren't about me, they were about you. I stood up slowly, looking down at him. A man who used to be my whole world, now just a fragile, broken body on a hospital bed. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "not because you deserve it, but because I do." The words tasted bitter and healing at the same time. I placed the envelope on the table next to him. Inside was a letter for when, or if, he ever woke up. If not, it would be the last thing I'd ever write him. Then I turned and walked out. The next morning, the call came. Time of death, 4:16 a.m. I stood in the kitchen when I heard it. Lily was in the living room watching cartoons, her little giggles floating through the air like music. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stood there. Number Daniel was gone. Not in theory, not in limbo, but really gone, I told Lily gently. As gently as one can tell a child that her father wasn't coming back. Her bottom lip trembled. "Will he be in the stars now, Mummy?" "Yes," I whispered, hugging her tightly. "He'll always be there, watching over you." That night, when she fell asleep, I sat alone in the backyard with a glass of wine and the cold night air wrapping around me like a shroud. I looked up at the sky, wondering if Daniel was somewhere among the stars, or just a memory fading from the universe. The funeral was small, family, friends, some co-workers. Sophie didn't show up. I didn't expect her to. I don't know if that made it easier or harder. Afterward, people told me I was brave, that I was strong, that they didn't know how I managed. But the truth is, I didn't feel strong. I just survived. Some days, surviving is enough. Weeks passed, then months. I found a rhythm again, slow, uncertain, but mine. I took Lily to school. I went back to work part-time. I started journaling, painting again. Little pieces of myself returned like petals after a storm. And then one day I got a letter from Sophie, a real letter, handwritten. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I just wanted to say I still think about Lily every single day. I wonder how she's doing. I wonder if she asks about me. I wish I could undo everything, but I can't. I'm in therapy now, trying to become someone better than the person I was. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just for you to know. I never stopped loving you as my sister, even when I ruined it all. I folded the letter and sat in silence. I didn't write back, but I didn't rip it up either. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need a response. Sometimes it's just letting go. And so I did. I let go of the pain, the rage, the constant question of why me. I let go of Daniel, of Sophie, of the life I thought I was supposed to have. And I stepped into the new one, scarred, but still standing. Because survival isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live, even when the past still lingers in the shadows. And as I watched Lily chase fireflies in the twilight, I realized maybe I didn't need a perfect ending, just peace, and I finally had it.